So it came about that the king decided to do without Parliament. I mean, Charles's first whole idea is, of course, is that the king derives his authority from God. Parliament, with the exception of taxes, has no specific authority, no specific right to exist. Now, you can argue all of this back and forth, but the reality is, of course, is that politically, um, you can't govern without Parliament, at least not for very long. And you certainly can't do anything big without Parliament. If nothing else, you need money. So this was kind of a doomed effort to begin with. And Charles, Charles could have made it if he had done, if he had just been king. But he's a king with a fairly aggressive foreign policy and a fairly aggressive religious policy, and it's going to do damage, and the damage is going to pile up. He dissolves Parliament, and so, which is his right at this time, and basically Parliament can be, done away with, but you can't collect taxes without Parliament, and it's hard to run a foreign policy without Parliament, particularly an aggressive one. And, Parliament was intimately involved in terms of making England Protestant instead of Catholic. And, lots of things are entwined with Parliament. But the king has the right to dissolve it, and he does. Also, a few years later, he appoints a guy by the name of William Laud, to be Archbishop of Canterbury, which is a functioning head of the church. Now, the king is the head of the English church, the Anglican church here in the United States. We call it the Episcopal Church. Laud, not a bad guy, a stickler for detail, though, and who really tried to get the church, in shape, almost military shape in a manner of speaking. Certainly tried to do all the things which the Anglican Church was supposed to be to do. And the Book of Common Prayer was going to be enforced, and the altar was going to be set up for the celebration of the Eucharist, of the Mass, and just all kinds of details. And it's going to annoy people, and they're going to see Laud ruling as though he were a pope. He wasn't. He was, as far as I can tell, just a very solid fellow who absolutely meant to govern the church the way church was supposed to be governed. But sometimes you have to do a little give and take, and he most assuredly was taking and not giving. Again, he's just following the rules, but and he's just doing reforms, trying to make the rules work. But people saw in his exercise of authority an attempt to be a pope. And so, and then Charles decides to have religious uniformity all across the island of Britain. Well, good luck with that. The Scots have what's called Presbyterianism, a form of Calvinism. They're not going to be amused at Anglicanism. And this turns into a series of wars, which, frankly, Charles doesn't have the money to fight. The Scots, I don't know that they were particularly wild about fighting these wars. And remember, Charles is also King of Scotland. I don't know that the Scots are particularly wild about fighting these wars, but fight them they do. And Charles usually comes out second worst in this whole thing. So, Charles, he's broke. He's cutting off people's ears, for God's sakes, for writing long books. He's engaging in wars that he's losing. I can only wonder what his popularity was at this point. I don't think they did polls, though. And so he tries to get around the parliamentary issue by calling a great council. Great councils are legal. The king has a council, which is kind of like the cabinet in the U.S. system, And then there could be a great council. There's a word, it's called a forced, AFFOCED, a forced council. And he tried to get that to substitute for Parliament in order to raise money. And that didn't work at all. And the Magnum Concilium did not work at all. And so he asked to call Parliament back, finally asked to call Parliament back because he broke. And he calls in what's called the short Parliament. They are far more interested in getting the constitutional issues right than giving Charles money. Charles dismisses him. He's got to bring Parliament back. This is called the Long Parliament. It's going to meet for over a decade, and they are going to hate Charles, and it's going to lead to a civil war. It's going to virtually destroy England. And at one point, Charles basically invades Parliament and drags the Speaker of Parliament down. Now, the Speaker of Parliament speaks not for himself, but for Parliament. So it's his opinions as he states are not his opinions, but Parliament's opinions. And so while he's getting pushed around by the king and his men, and essentially told to fall in line, Roy Lentil says, "Look, these are not my personal views. That you're a jerk." He didn't use the word jerk. And he says, "May it please your majesty, I have neither eyes to see nor tongue to speak in this place, but as the House is pleased to direct me." So he's saying, these may not be my opinion. These are the opinions of Parliament, whose servant I am here. And so that's where the American Speaker of the House comes from. And it certainly is where the British Speaker of the House comes from. These are not our personal opinions. These are Congress's or Parliament, particularly the House of Commons, personal opinion. And so, essentially, Charles is frustrated even here. And this will lead to the English Civil War and the execution, eventually, of Charles. Could all this have been avoided? Sure. Don't enforce religious policy so strictly. Don't spend money you don't have on wars you don't need. Don't go after the Scots. Yeah, well, all this don't be so touchy. All of this could have been avoided. But Charles had a genius for not avoiding things. And so the end result, of course, is that he's going to almost destroy England in a civil war, and then they're going to behead him. Okay, and that's where we'll come back.